Why is redistribution of power away from the center important? Like, why bother trying to sort of strive for that?
I'm coming from a background in academic philosophy, and I think from an early age I was struck by the fact that people sort of assume that the concepts that we use in everyday life have to have the meanings that they're given, by our parents, or justice has to mean this kind of thing, right and wrong has to mean this kind of thing. If somebody says, the word communism or capitalism, then that must, yield a kind of like effect in terms of like how we act and what we support. And so, to me, to give the example of taking power away from these central concepts means being able to step back and actually choose what we want to believe in. So being able to select for our own values. And in this sense, it's the same thing as trying to step outside of, the allegorical cave, right? Where people are telling us what we have to believe in, what we have to see, what we have to feel. But in reality, that's like some infinitely small subset of the sorts of things that we can care about, and the sorts of ways that we can, care for each other. And then second of all, when it comes to people's ability to affect change, I don't think that there's any first principles reason or any kind of indisputable law that says that, well, we have to listen to what, these people with arbitrary sources of power say about like how society has to be organized. Right. So to take the case of like data ownership, why should that be the sort of thing that we only have access to via third parties? Or when it comes to mental health, why should we have to rely on centralized third party providers? Why shouldn't our power, our ability to affect change in these areas not be decentralized? Why should it not be something that goes back to people themselves rather than these institutions?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned mental health there, and that was something we were talking about before the podcast. And I guess we'll touch on that again because I have some thoughts about that. But yeah, I agree. There are, the ways that people are brought up. There are these institutions with their kind of own sets of morality, right? You have like state-based morality, you have a religious morality. There's kind of like a cultural morality, and some people have, a kind of only political, right? And they're maybe atheistic. Some people are political, religious, and then they have this kind of mixture of like both, this kind of like political, state based, and religious. So it's an interesting kind of thing to analyze and to look at, in the world. Yeah, I mean, I guess personally, where do you sit? You saying like you were interested in these topics and you wanted to explore them. Like what kind of conclusions did you come to then? Like what did you conclude from kind of like looking at these topics?
I think, given both my background and like the experiences, the struggles that I've had, but then also what I see in the world, it's that people don't always know that they can have a share in their lives that they're not taught that they can have. Right. So like, let's say like we presuppose that everything is public, like our data is public, or that like the government has access to like what we do. That's a presupposition that doesn't have to be there. So it's kind of like when we step back into the latent space behind those assumptions, we actually have more of a view of our say in the lives that we co-create. And to me, that's the sort of thing that. Sorry, I'm getting distracted over here. To me, that's something really, really incredibly meaningful. But then also, it's the kind of thing that people from all walks of life can resonate with, right? So it doesn't matter like what your profession is. It doesn't matter what country you're from. In a very real sense, it doesn't really it's also temporally invariant. So you could be from any part of history, really, and probably you having a say in how your life goes has mattered to you. So it's mattered to the evolution of democratic civilization across time and will continue to matter. And it's over a little bit more than a decade at this point that we've had the tools to be able to claim not just a kind of soft power, but a variety of, I think, hard power in the form of taking away the investment in people's lives, the grip on people's lives that central banks all over the world have, or that fiat currency has. And that can't be overstated.
Yeah, I agree. And I think sort of I want to read a quote, and I can't remember who the guy was. I think it was Brian Brooks, I think his name is. He did something at Coinbase, and he was some kind of like banker kind of guy in America, but or Coinbase, was it Binance or something? He went to it. Anyway, he said sometimes the technology comes along and supplants the assumptions institutions were based on. And so by that, for example, Bitcoin, like, oh, well, someone has to centralize the money because we have to like protect the gold, and like, or we have to protect the currency from hackers, and it has to be secure and it has to be managed, and in some ways, like maybe there was for a lot of these like crypto technologies, there were no alternatives prior, right? But just sort of like to your point, this is where the philosophy becomes interesting, because it kind of what's the word? The intersection of philosophy and technology, right? And how now the philosophy of decentralization and the politics of decentralization can be realized because of technology, right? And I think that's like a really cool kind of binding of the two things. I like exploring that area, and that's what's made this whole thing possible, essentially, right? People are always talking about how can we like have these like decentralized communities and how can we manage our thing, but then when we're in this digital age and it makes it harder. Like there are ways to do it, right? You could have your own currency, but how are you going to like trade with other people around the world? How are you going to make that efficient? Like how are you going to secure it, right? You have to amass wealth just to secure the wealth that you have, in a sense. And then like technologies like Bitcoin like remove some of those barriers. So it allows for sovereignty, and like these ideas of freedom, the philosophies of freedom, to be realized in a like advanced technological sense.
Unchecked governments have eradicated privacy and truth. Those who resist are brought down swiftly, but we refuse to submit. LunarPunks are freedom fighters, protected by encrypted shadows. The future we're building is sovereign and uncensorable. The moonlit night is coming.